Okay, my friends, here it is. The video that's going to explain to you everything you need to know in order to successfully utilize the manures in the garden. So I'm going to say some things about it, and then I will take you out and show you exactly what I'm talking about and the most effective ways to utilize this beautiful gift of nature in the garden. Because make no mistake, humans and animals and agriculture have gone hand in hand for many thousands of years. And manure is one of the finest things that you can add to your soil to boost the fertility of the soil and also to improve the community of microorganisms that exist. But rather than just tell you the different techniques, I'm going to actually show you here in a moment. But before we do that, we must understand something. So there is essentially three categories to the manures. And these are I just made these up. But the first category is the hot. The second one is the warm, and the third one is the cool. Okay, so the first one is the hot manure, and that's basically just the chicken manure. Now you hear online and stuff where someone will say, "Oh, you can't use chicken manure; it'll burn the plant." Well, what does that really mean? So, and you hear that it's too hot. Well, it means this: a plant absorbs nutrients and water through a process called osmosis by creating osmotic pressure. It does this by maintaining a higher concentration of salts in its plant tissue and the root tissue than exists in the surrounding soil. And so the two solutions on the inside of the plant tissue and on the outside are always trying to reach equilibrium. And so the plant will maintain a higher concentration of the salts, thereby absorbing through osmosis the water and along with it the nutrients that it needs to survive. Now, if something is too hot, that means that whatever you've applied to the soil has too many fertilizer salts, too many minerals and ammonia and all. Fertilizer salts means a lot of different things, but there's essentially too much of it in the soil or in whatever you've added. And so it will actually create an environment that has a higher concentration of salt in the surrounding soil than the plant can maintain in its tissue. And so osmosis will still happen, but in the opposite direction. So it will actually draw nutrients and water out of the plant. And that is what we call, when you see it in it'll manifest first in the furthest tips of the leaves. And you will see it looks just brown and crispy and dead, like it's been burnt. So that's what is meant by it will burn the plant. Now, thankfully, it's very easy to remedy this with the chicken manure, and I will show you exactly how to do it. Now, the second one is the warm, and the warm ones we can use fresh because they're not very hot, so they don't have a lot of salts within them, and so we're not going to have that reverse, the osmotic pressure the opposite way. So we can utilize them fresh, or they can be composted. It's always best to add it right about now, late fall, early winter, throughout the winter. It's best to add it now so it can just mellow out and become broken down by the soil food web. You could use it fresh though. I have used both horse and cow manure fresh. But here's the thing about horse manure is that horses do not digest their food as thoroughly as the cow does. So therefore, there will be seeds from whatever the horse has eaten in the horse manure. So you have to have a plan in place to deal with that, or you have to hot compost, meaning you get it up to 160 or more degrees. You have to hot compost it in order to sterilize the weed seeds. Cow manure is generally free of the weed seeds, okay? So it's very, very beneficial. Cow manure and horse manure are some of the best things you can utilize. And then on the cool spectrum is the things like rabbit, alpaca, sheep, goat. All of these things do not contain high amounts of fertilizer salts, and so they can be utilized fresh, or you can incorporate them into the soil at any point throughout the growing season. You could also make a tea from them and use it to water the plants at any point along the growing season, okay? So we're gonna go outside and we're gonna focus on using the chicken manure and the horse manure. And then we'll come back in and I'll tell you the super huge red flag about manures. Okay, here for the first example is the garlic bed. Now I've made the furrows and I have planted the garlic. I've broken them all up and I'm planting them about a hand's width apart. And then I'm just going to rake over them about 2 inches of the horse manure. Now, we are using horse manure that has had a straw or hay bedding. And you can see here that the horse manure is quite fresh. because I just went to the farm and got it. And so when you break it apart, it's still quite soft and it's green, and there's a lot of life and microorganisms happening. Now you can also see that the horse does not fully digest the food because you can still see plant material. Cow manure does not look this same way. But this you could use fresh if you wanted, but the best is to do what we're doing here and just rake it over any of the beds that you have at the moment, so that you then let it decompose all winter long, and it will look like this. Okay, now this year I'm going to use chicken manure on the garlic bed because that's what we have access to. So I'm going to go through and sprinkle about 2 inches of chicken manure over the entire bed of garlic. Now you can see by looking at it, this chicken coop, I went and cleaned out my friend's chicken coop, and it had not been cleaned out in a long time. This is like 2 to 3 years, and they use straw bedding. So it's actually kind of like already composted. This is not too bad because you can't make out any of the individual chicken droppings. When you can make out the individual droppings is when it's still really hot. This is already pretty well composted, but just to be sure and to do it the best way possible, we're going to add it now in the fall time. So I added 1 inch or so of the chicken manure and then covered the rest in straw. And here's another way to utilize chicken or horse or cow manure in the fall. And you just sprinkle it over the beds. You can put it quite thick because it's going to have all winter to break down. And then we just incorporate it into the leaves and grass clippings or straw, whatever it is. Now is the time to add all of this fertility and let it marinate over the winter. Now here's another wonderful method, and we're going to utilize leaves or straw or whatever it is that you have. And then we're going to layer it. So we're going to put a layer of the brown organic matter, the leaves, and then we're going to put a layer of the chicken manure, about 2 inches thick. We can go quite thick. Then we want to do this in between each layer. We want to be spraying it. So you want it to be really nice and soaked with the water in between each layer. And you'll see why here in a moment. Now we are adding layer upon layer of the chicken manure and then the leaves, chicken manure and then the leaves, until we get it about 4 feet high. And then we want to add some of the labs, if we have some of that, some of the lactic acid bacteria. And here I am winterizing some of my JLF barrels. And so I'm going to be pulling out a number of 5-gallon buckets worth of the JLF. And that is going to really supercharge this decomposition process. There's going to be a explosion of microorganism activity happening here. And the leaves are going to work to really help to capture all the nutrients and nitrogen as it decomposes. So it's very important to add the brown material. Now, next thing and final thing is to keep it covered because we want to be able to control the moisture level. So we are going to keep it covered like this and put bars so that the tarp doesn't blow away. And then we're going to turn it about once every month, every other month we're going to turn it so that by springtime you will have this beautiful, rich, black material that has been well composted. It's not fully composted yet, but it's pretty much on its way, bursting with nutrients and all kinds of life. And we're going to use this, incorporate it into the soil or as a mulch. It's just going to feed and feed and feed so that we can have a thriving garden. Okay, now here's the super huge red flag, guys. Unfortunately, because of the way that we do things in our modern world, we cannot utilize the manures as freely as our ancestors did because of all of the chemicals and drugs that are pumped into the animals when they're raised on an industrial type system. So antibiotics being number one. The animals have to have a lot of antibiotics because otherwise they would be sick when there's an ill kind of animal husbandry happening. So those antibiotics pass through and into its manure. And so by the very nature of an antibiotic, antibacterial, killing microorganisms, we do not want that in the soil because that can build up in the soil and cause big problems. Also, there are certain chemicals that get sprayed on stuff to inhibit the growth of broadleaf plants. And so horses or cows may eat the stuff that's been sprayed with this, and it goes through their digestive tract and out the other side, and it can remain effective in the manure. And so we have to be very aware of that. Unfortunately, but it's the case, okay? So how do we combat that? Number one is we have to source from responsible places. Don't go to your megalopolis, huge industrial ag complex and get their manures. Just don't even worry about it. Okay, get it from the person who has a couple horses, or the person that has chickens, or clean out your buddy's chicken coop, something like that. You know, someone that you know is not pumping these things full of chemicals. Then number 2 is to compost it, okay? Because a lot of these compounds will break down for the most part, given time. So compost it. That's the second best way, okay? So guys, give the video a thumbs up if you feel like you gained something. Also, leave a comment. Share whatever methods you have used, manure. So anything that I missed or whatever, go ahead and put it into the comments, and I'll see you next time.